Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Javier Gomez. Javier, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the U.S. Census Bureau webinar on the Community Resilience Estimates. My name is Javier Gomez, Section Lead in the Small Areas Estimates branch in the Social, Economic, and Housing Statistics Division. I'm joined today by my colleagues Shay Sawyer, Technical Lead for Model Data Products Development, and Benjamin Gurens, Chief of Small Area Modeling and Development Branch. During this presentation, we will be covering why is the Census Bureau measuring resilience and social vulnerability? What are the community resilience estimates? What CRE product should I use and where is this data available? Why should I use the CRE? And finally, I will do an overview of two of our data visualization tools. At the end of the presentation, we will be answering questions. But in the meantime, if there are questions or comments in the chat, in the Q&A section, my colleagues are more than happy to answer. With that being said, let us begin. The Census Bureau's Community Resilience Estimates provide a precise, understandable, and easy-to-use measure of social vulnerability. But why is the Census Bureau measuring resilience, social vulnerability? To answer that question, let us first define what is community resilience. Community resilience is a measure of the capacity of individuals and households within a community to cope with external stresses of the impacts of a disaster. Research shows that resilience can be predicted by individual and household characteristics. On your screen, community resilience will be the intersection of social vulnerability, like risk factors, weaknesses or lack of resources, and capacity, like protective factors, strengths, and capital or resources. There are already other measures of population resilience that use publicly available decennial census or American Community Survey data. Because they derive from publicly available data, the measures are either deficient in granularity or accuracy. CRE instead uses individual and household level data, which retains correlation of individual risks. This is ideal for identifying most vulnerable populations to ensure equitable distribution of resources. The origins of the community resilience estimates can be traced back to the COVID years, where the pandemic reiterated the need for usable information about the population. Many groups reached out to the Census Bureau for data with an overwhelming need for a single, easy-to-understand metric. The purpose of the CRE is to create data products from the vast quantities of Census Bureau data that are granular, relevant, precise, and timely. Most vulnerability indices that utilize public data use county, tract, and block group data to create measures. The CRE instead utilizes information on households and people to create granular estimates. Now let's explain more in detail what the community resilience estimates are. The CRE are model estimates of social vulnerability of the population that uses data from the American Community Survey, or ACS, and Population Estimates Program. The ACS is a nationally representative survey with data on the characteristics of the U.S. population. The sample is selected from all counties and county equivalents and has a sample size of about 3.5 million housing units each year. It has more than 40 different topic areas. We also use auxiliary data from the Population Estimates Program, which is the Census Bureau program that produces and publishes estimates of the population living at a given time within a geographic entity in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. We use data from the Population Estimates Program by tract, age group, race and ethnicity, and sex. The CRE looks at different components of social vulnerability and flags records that match certain criteria. Individual and household components of social vulnerability that are used for the CRE include income to poverty ratio, single or zero caregiver households, unit level crowding, communication barriers, full-time employment, disability status, health insurance coverage, being 65 years old or older, vehicle access, and broadband internet access. Let's go over an example. The CRE starts its analysis by looking at the individual and household responses to determine if an individual is at social vulnerability. If a component of social vulnerability is found, the flag is marked and tabulated. Then, small areas modeling techniques are applied to create estimates. Here we have question number 12 from the American Community Survey, which deals with access to vehicles in the household. CRE reviews a response to vehicle questions on ACS. If a household does not have a vehicle available, then a component of social vulnerability flag is applied to all the individuals in the household. If at least one vehicle is available, then the household is not flagged. The result is an estimate of the number of individuals and the number of components of social vulnerability that they are living with, categorized into three groups: 0 flag components of social vulnerability, 1 to 2 flag components of social vulnerability, 3 or more flag components of social vulnerability, the most at risk. Estimates from the CRE are available at the national, state, county, and tract levels. Some advantages of the CRE over other indices are that the CRE provides estimates on the number of people, percentages of the population, and margins of error. For example, from the 2022 CRE data, which was released on January 30th of this year, we found that approximately 115.5 million people across the United States have 0 components of social vulnerability. We see that over 145 million people, or about 44% of the population, have 1 or 2 components of social vulnerability. And finally, we estimate that almost 68 million people live with 3 or more components of social vulnerability. What CRE data products should I use? Several different data products have been developed related to social vulnerability. Those are Standard CRE, CRE for Equity, CRE for Puerto Rico, CRE for HEAT. Standard CRE, which I have covered through this presentation, provides an easily understood metric of social vulnerability. It provides estimates for impacts of disasters down to the census tract's geographic level. The CRE for Equity provides context to the estimates and adds to the discussion of equity. This data set provides information from 4 different sources: Standard Community Resilience Estimates, American Community Survey, Decennial Census, and Census Bureau's Planning Database. All this information in one data set allows users quick access to the data on a variety of topics concerning social vulnerability and equity. The Community Resilience Estimates for Puerto Rico provide an easily understood metric for a community's capacity to withstand and recover from a disaster, such as a hurricane or hazardous event. It expands on the Standard CRE, which focuses on the United States. Using restricted microdata from the Puerto Rico Community Survey and small area estimation methods, the estimates measure social vulnerability to disasters at the state, Commonwealth, municipio, and census tract geographic levels. The experimental CRE for HEAT measures social vulnerability specifically in the context of extreme heat exposure. This estimate was developed in collaboration with Arizona State University's Knowledge Exchange for Resilience and has some methodological differences with the US estimates. Where is this data available? The CRE data can be found in different places. The main place is the Census Bureau website, where you can find everything related to CRE, from data sets, technical documentation, frequently asked questions, etc. The second place where you can find the CRE data is at the Census Bureau main data hub, datacensus.gov, or through our application programming interface, or API. Finally, we have published several data visualization applications that allow you to explore the CRE data. Those are the CRE dashboard for standard CRE, CRE for equity dashboard, and CRE for Puerto Rico. Why should I use the CRE? Benefits of using the CRE include the ability to identify most socially vulnerable populations for the equitable distribution of resources. The CRE is the timeliest, most statistically precise and granular measure of vulnerability. The small area methodologies are proven. We're open to discussions about data products that meet user needs. CRE output allows for flexibility in how data is analyzed and interpreted. Partners can work with the Census Bureau to adjust components of social vulnerability as needed. At this point, I would like to do a demo of two data visualization applications available to you. I will be focusing today on the dashboards for standard CRE and CRE for equity. So let me switch to my browser here where I already have open the two dashboards. Let me start with the standard CRE dashboard, which, as you can see here on the top left, has already been updated to the 2022 data. Let me go first a little bit about the different panels that you will find in this dashboard before we start going over a couple of examples. On the left panel of the dashboard, you're going to have a description of the product along with the components of social vulnerability, feature tracks, links to feature services, documentation, and a link to download data. Notice that if you click on download data, it takes you to the CRE website for links to download data for the different geographic levels. So you could download for all geographic levels at once, or county, nation, state, or tracks. Let's go back to the dashboard. On the bottom of the dashboard, we have three different maps for social vulnerability map, predominant group map, and a statistical difference map. And I'm going to elaborate a little more into those three different options in a minute. But at the top right, you have the option to switch between the three different groups of social vulnerability. 3+ components of social vulnerability group, 1 to 2, and notice how the coloring of the map has changed, or 0 components of social vulnerability. Let me go back to 3+ components. And then, of course, at the main panel of the dashboard, we have the map. And then on the left, we have the legend for the map. So let's start going over a couple of examples and see what we find in this tool. So I'm going to zoom in to El Paso County in Texas. So the first thing that we can see here, just by looking at the coloring, and remember, we're looking at social vulnerability map, the group for 3 or more social components of social vulnerability. So just looking at the color of this particular geography, looks like a light orange. If we compare it against the legend here on the left, well, seems to be this group. So what that means is that the percentage of the population in this particular geography with 3 or more components of social vulnerability falls in the 22 to 30%. And we can always just click on this geography, and what is going to happen is that we have a pop-up window that shows us more information. So of course we have El Paso County, 3+ components of social vulnerability. We have the estimated total population for this county, which is about 860,000. Percentage of residents with 3+ components of social vulnerability has been estimated at 27%. And of course, we can explore the other groups. Let's close this and switch to 1 to 2. Once again, you see the coloring on the map has changed. So now it seems to be darker. Seems to be in line with 45 to 100%. We click on this, and we see, of course, the estimated total population remains the same. The percentage of residents with 1 or 2 components of social vulnerability has been estimated at 48.8%. And if we switch to zero components group, once again, the coloring has changed. Looks like light orange, so somewhere in the 22 to 30%. We click on it, sorry, and we can see the percentage of residents with zero components of social vulnerability is estimated at 24.11%. Notice that we have compared the three different groups, 0 components, 1 to 2, and 3+. And the group with 1 or 2 components seems to be the largest group in this particular geography, which is exactly what you will see if we switch to the second tab here, predominant group map. Notice how the coloring has changed once again. El Paso County, which is the example that we've been working on, is colored yellow, which according to the legend that we have here on the left, indicates that the largest population in this particular geography, the largest group, has 1 to 2 components of social vulnerability. If we click on it, once again, we have a pop-up window, and we will have the estimates for the three different groups, where once again, and of course, these are the same numbers that we saw on the previous map, 27% for the 3+ components of social vulnerability, 48.8% for 1 or 2, 24% for 0 components of social vulnerability. We can take a look quickly at other examples. For example, on the legend, it says anything that is colored blue, the largest group will be the one with 0 components of social vulnerability. So just by looking at the map, we can see here, there's another county here in Texas, Ford County, where, yep, the percentage of residents with 0 components of social vulnerability is at 39.26%. The other end, anything that is colored on red, the largest group will be the one with 3 or more components of social vulnerability. So we can see here, for example, Upton County, the percentage of residents with 3 or more components of social vulnerability is estimated at 41.7%. The last tab that I want to show you here in this dashboard is a statistical difference map. And what it does is just compare the estimates at a particular geography that you select versus the national estimates. So staying with the same example of El Paso County, we're looking at 3 or more components of social vulnerability. And according to the color, it's higher. What that means is that the estimate of the population, the percentage of the population in this particular county will be higher than that of the rest of the country. If we click on it, the pop-up window is going to give us interesting information. One second. Okay, here we go. So once again, El Paso County, obviously the same estimated total population. Notice here the estimated percentage of the population with 3 or more components of social vulnerability is higher than the national estimate, and it is statistically different. Something important is that this pop-up window also provides more context to this population that can be useful when compared to the different components of social vulnerability. So for example, the population that is Hispanic or Latino in El Paso County is estimated at 83%, which is higher than the national estimate. And of course, this makes sense considering the geographic location of El Paso County. If we scroll down through this table, we see population that is 65 years and over in El Paso County is estimated at 12.5%, which will be lower than the national estimate. We have a lot of information here. The vehicle access, occupied housing units with no vehicle available, 6.5%, which is lower than the national estimate. Households with a broadband internet subscription, 86.3%, lower than the national estimates. And of course, you can always just change the different groups. 0 components, so 1 to 2. Here at the top of the dashboard, you also have the option to switch to a different geography. So far, what I've been doing is just zooming in and zooming out of the map, or you can also just select here at state and county. So for example, let's say that we want to take a look at Northern Virginia. If you give it a second. Let's say that we want to take a look at Arlington. So remember that the CRE provides estimates down to the tract level. So if we randomly click on any of these geographies, we see census tract 1025 in Arlington County. The percentage of residents with 3 or more components of social vulnerability is estimated at 10.5%, which is not statistically different than the national estimate. The population that is Hispanic or Latino is estimated at 16.1%. That is statistically different. Sorry. Occupied housing units with no vehicles available, 5.9%. That is statistically different. All right. So this is the first dashboard, the standard CRE dashboard. The second dashboard that I would like to show to you is the CRE for equity dashboard. Remember, CRE for equity is a supplemental product that provides more context to the CRE estimates. And just like that, the dashboard does exactly that, provides more context. So first of all, you're going to see some similarities with the previous dashboard, along with a few differences. So let me go first over the similarities. On the left, you're going to have a panel with a description of the product, along with the different components of social vulnerability, links to feature services, documentation, and to download data. One small difference here is that this panel can be moved. Then, of course, you have the 3 different tabs of the 3 different maps, the option to switch at the top right to a different group of social vulnerability, and the option to switch to a different geography. The one big difference is that this dashboard provides more context. So you will see here this different data that is provided. One important thing to mention is that the data that is shown here does not change as you click on a different geography on the map. It only changes when you select a different geography from the menu here. So because nothing has been selected at this point, the default is the United States, where we can see that, let's take a look at the different data that is being provided. We can see that at the nation, 35.1% of the population is estimated to live with 0 social vulnerability components, 44 with 1 or 2 social vulnerability components, and 20.6% is estimated to live with 3 or more social vulnerability components. If you take a look here on the right panel, we have more information coming from different ACS tables. And here on the bottom, you will see information on which tables were used to bring this data. So providing more context, we see that the population, the households below the poverty level for the United States is estimated at 12.4%, households without vehicle access at 8.3%, households with broadband internet access at 88.3%. And of course, we have more tabs here for more data. So these are key facts. If we switch to race and ethnicity, we see a breakdown by total Hispanic or Latino, total not Hispanic or Latino. And notice how when you hover over the graphs, it provides even more information. So for example, total Latino or Hispanic or Latino, we have an estimate of 61.8 million. Total not Hispanic or Latino, 269.3 million, and so on. We can switch to the health insurance tab, where we have a breakdown of the population with no health insurance by different age groups. So we see that, for example, in the ages 35 to 64, we have an estimate of 13.4 million people with no health insurance. And switch to age and sex, we have a breakdown by female and male by different age groups. Or we can switch to language spoken at home, where we can see that at the nation, it's estimated that 244 million people speak English only, or 16.2 million speak Spanish with English less than very well. So if we continue working on the same examples that I was showing you in the previous dashboard, let's go back to El Paso County. As I mentioned before, the data here on the dashboard is not going to change if we click on the map. So let's try it. We have a pop-up window similar to the previous dashboard, but the information here did not change. So what we're going to do is select it from the menu. So Texas. And notice how now the data has changed to Texas. And 1 second, please. Okay. Let's go to El Paso. Okay, so now we're getting data for Texas, El Paso County, and we can see the different breakdowns for the different groups. 24.1% estimated with zero social vulnerability components, 48.8% estimated with 1 to 2 social vulnerability components, and 27% estimated with 3 or more social vulnerability components. And then we have extra information coming from the ACS. 20% of the household live below the poverty level. 6.5% households without vehicle access. 86.3% of the households have broadband internet access. Of course, most of the population in this county will be Hispanic or Latino. Total white alone estimated at 429,000. Health insurance, we see that between the ages of 35 and 64, we have an estimate of close to 78,000 people without health insurance. Breakdown by age and sex. And then, of course, language. We see that approximately 225,000 speak English less than very well. Okay, so these are two of the dashboards that we have available to you to play with the CRE data. Once again, standard CRE dashboard and CRE for equity dashboard. So let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation. We would like to encourage you to reach out to your staff. Example of success stories include Knowledge Exchange for Resilience at Arizona State University, Economic Development Administration, and National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Links to all of the resources mentioned in this presentation will be included in the slides, and of course, the recording of the presentation will be available to you in a few weeks. Thank you, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments that you may have at the email on your screen, csite.cre@census.gov. Thank you once again, and if there are any questions, we can go over them now.
Thanks, Javier. I can go over some Q&A questions right now.
Thanks.
Okay. So we already went over, a lot of people are asking about getting access to the slides and the recording, and we have a link in the chat about that will be posted in 2 or 3 weeks for anyone who wants to look over the slides and video
Correct.
later. After that, so people were asking about essentially identifying the metrics that go into the CRE, and is there a plan to kind of update or consider other metrics? And I'll say what we posted, and you can add to it if you want. But essentially, the CRE was developed to measure vulnerability to the COVID-19 pandemic originally,
Mhm.
and the team kind of used existing social vulnerability tools and that literature to establish the CRE with the current indicators. Right now, there's not really any plans to adjust those components that we talked about, but we are creating new products like the CRE for heat that does make adjustments in terms of heat exposure. And if you have any suggestions, someone on the team can post our email to reach out to us. It's cside.cre@census.gov, but we'll post that in the chat.
Yeah, let me go back to the slide with the email. There it is.
Perfect.
Mhm.
So people are asking too, is there a way to determine what census tracts are contained within an area? And can you download the full CRE data for those census tracts specifically?
To download the data for a census tract specifically, not from the dashboard. The link to download data is going to take you to the CRE website where you will download all of the tracks basically at once.
Yeah, essentially what we were saying is there's not really an easy way. You kind of have to toggle in between looking at the viewer to see, hey, are there tracks within a certain town or area that you're interested, and then try to match that up with the data. You can't download specific tracks within that data, but there are some resources out there with geocoders if you have an address in mind. So that was something that we responded to.
Mhm.
Let's see. So people were asking about, we kind of got a methodological question, whether the small area estimation uses county level estimates of multivariate data, like the existence of certain components of social vulnerability. Is a methodology document. And we just said, yeah, we use a post stratification method using small estimation, using demographic variables, like age, race, and sex. And I posted a link for the detailed tech document that really goes over a little bit more of the methodology behind it. If someone in our panel could post that detailed technical document in the chat, that would be great. But that will go a little bit more into the methodology. So there's another common question that pops up. Is it possible to see components of social vulnerability that are predominant in a certain tract or county?
No. All we have is the extra information on the supplemental equity dashboard that provides more context.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Due to the methodology, the small area estimation methodology and disclosure, we can't necessarily give that information, but we do have those ACS 5-year variables that are on the equity dashboard. If you click on a geography, you'll see a pop-up, and you can see things like what is the poverty rate compared to the national estimate, or unemployment rate, or the age 65 or more. That will give you an idea of why an area might have a high prevalence of 3 or more social components of social vulnerability, if you're wondering. So we recommend using the equity supplement to get a better idea there. Okay. Another common question. I think this is an important one. Is there a dashboard for certain groups, such as the veteran population? Can you create almost like a CRE for specific groups? Is that available anywhere?
I don't know if somebody else wants to jump in with that. Sorry.
The answer is, at the moment, we do not have CRE estimates for specific subpopulations. I'll say that we are exploring that if we can do it methodologically. There are concerns about the reliability of the estimates once you start cutting it to smaller groups, but it's a kind of ongoing area of research for us that we're looking into. More methodological questions. What's the difference between the CDC SVI estimates and the Census Bureau CRE estimates? And I'll say that what we put in the chat is that the SVI uses data that is published for entire areas to rank given areas. Margins of error are kind of basically ignored there. There's no access to internal restricted ACS data to determine if a person is potently social vulnerability. So essentially, the SVI just looks at a bunch of separate variables on the aggregate level and averages it all together to see whether it's high or low in a given area to see what. And we have a different methodology. Essentially, we actually flag people and households, and we determine the vulnerable populations. And then through small area estimation, we make sure that those estimates are reliable and we have smaller margins of error. So we think that our methodology is superior to the SVI, and we do have some working papers that are out there that show that the SVI tends to, when there's differences between CRE and SVI, it's that the SVI tends to flag areas with higher margins of error and uncertainty. So we do believe that the methodology that we use is has a higher statistical quality. Okay. Let me see. Are there any other important questions that have popped up? Just going through it right now.
Yes, and thank you for helping me on this because I cannot see the questions here.
Sure. Let me see. Hold on. Are there plans for other levels of geographies to be supported other than the ones we currently have? Is a question.
You want... I'm sorry if anybody else wanted to jump in. Or...
This is Chase Sawyer. I'm happy to answer that. And so, yeah, we definitely think that if there's an interest in that, that's something we're interested in finding out more about what stakeholders are interested in and what we can provide. Currently, we don't have finite plans for any of those other geographies, but if individuals want to reach out to us and contact us at that email address, we're extremely interested. We have heard things like cities or other governmental organizations would be extremely helpful to decision makers. And so providing that feedback is helpful to us.
Yeah, thank you.
So people have asked, is the pop-up data in the equity map, is that also, are you able to download that? And we responded, yes, the pop-up data is part of the CRE for equity. So that is part of everything that you see in those pop-up windows on the equity
windows,
dashboard.
Yes.
You can download that.
Correct.
And then people are also asking, can you make people are asking about whether you can download the map layers, and yes, the map layers are available and you can find them in the tool on the left panel.
Correct. Yes.
If you want to download those map layers.
Correct. Yes. If you go here on the left panel, the different dashboards, you have the links for the feature services, so you can download those map layers.
Yeah.
So the same for the standard CRE dashboard or for the equity dashboard right here.
Perfect. And then there's a couple of questions about when I mentioned the comparison of SVI methodology to CRE, where they can find that on the census website. If someone in the panel can post that, Kate Williard has done 2 different research papers on it that compares the CRE to the SVI, one for the US and one for Puerto Rico, to show some of the differences and some of the concerns, frankly, that exist when you just use the publicly available data and you kind of ignore the margins of error and use that for social vulnerability. So someone on the panel will post those papers because they are very important and to consider. Let's see. So some people are asking about additional data to compare with the vulnerability variables, things like flooding and earthquake risk. So something that we haven't talked about as much with this presentation, but we are continuing to explore looking at hazard risk and not just social vulnerability. We have been putting together and working on certain ranking tables that actually show data from the FEMA's National Risk Index, which actually takes into account flooding risk, earthquake risk, hurricane risk. We actually put out a flooding table with the most recent January 2024 release of the CRE 2022 that actually looks at the most socially vulnerable areas that have flooding risk. So we didn't quite go into that discussion today because we're kind of very early on in exploring the combination of vulnerability and actual hazards. But that's something that we're going to continue to look at and potentially consider also for our interactive tools. And someone mentioned wildfires as well. Yes, we actually are going to put out a summer release that will include hurricanes and wildfires and look at the most socially vulnerable areas that have some risk in those categories. Trying to see if there's any other questions we can go through. That might be most of the ones that I saw, unless anyone in the panel wants to chime in with any important questions that I may have missed. I think that's pretty much looking at it. I think that's pretty much it in terms of questions that we found. And you can always email those questions too. If I did miss any of the questions, because there were a lot of questions in the Q&A that didn't get covered, please contact us at seaside.cre@census.gov, and we will make sure to answer those questions.
Correct. And once again, thank you for helping me fill the questions, because with the current setup, I cannot see the chat, but thank you for assisting me.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of participation in the Q&A. I really appreciate it.
That is great to see. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So I don't think we have any additional questions, but as my colleagues mentioned, if there are any questions that you may have after, feel free to reach us at the email on your screen. Once again, seaside.cre@census.gov. Any last minute questions or comments? Well, I think we're good then. Thank you very much to everyone attending. Thank you to my colleagues for assisting. What tool was used to make the dashboard? That's a collaboration with Esri. Do we have any last questions, comments? All right, then. Well, thank you very much to everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, and this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.